If you think you know how to be objective and eliminate bias from your opinion, you may be a little biased towards a completely unrealistic view of yourself and the world. So let's talk a bit about bias, specifically with regards to reviews or critiques or generally opinions that are being expressed with the intention of informing potential customers about whether or not something is worth investing money into. Of course, this has been talked about extensively before. Total Biscuit, for example, among other people, has addressed it. Now, he has a slightly different approach. Of course, the things that he makes videos about are different. Video games as a digital medium can't really be compared to swords, knives, guns, etc., other physical objects that are being tested. But there are still some overlaps. Now, he calls himself a critic as opposed to a reviewer, and it is a useful distinction for sure. But there are also some overlaps. I mean, in both cases, you're trying to let people know if you think something is worth the money, something is a good purchase. Now, whether or not you call it a review, I usually do when I take a closer look at things, but either way. So bias is, of course, something that is generally, well, most people would say it's to be avoided. And in case of negative or bad bias, I would totally agree. I would distinguish between bad bias and, well, not necessarily good, but unavoidable bias that is less harmful or not harmful at all, really. Now, what I mean by that is the bad kind of bias is, for example, if somebody buys a, whatever object, let's just say it's a sword, from a company and has a bad experience with it. Let's say they're doing backyard cutting and they're trying to cut something and the blade snaps or breaks off and flies across the backyard and impales the dog or something. Then they will obviously be upset. And if that person then starts condemning everything about this company and says all they make is garbage, and etc., and keeps ranting and raving about that, that's bad bias. Now, the not so bad or more neutral bias is something that we all have. We all have our own biases. Obviously, they're based on our personal preferences, our past experiences, our financial situation, what we've heard from other people, rumors and etc., like our personal background, basically. And that in and of itself is fine as long as you're aware of it. If you're aware of your bias, then you can avoid falling for things like, demonizing an entire company based on one experience that you had with one product. Sometimes people write a quote-unquote review that consists of one sentence that basically goes, "This sucks." So that's the bad kind of bias, obviously. And you cannot expect anybody, a reviewer, to be 100% free of that. Now, personally, I try to keep it at a minimum, be aware of it, and be transparent, because that's what you have to do when you're trying to give people information about something. For example, if you've received something for free, for review, and especially if you're being paid to make a video about it, you have to disclose that. It's very important. I mean, yeah, sometimes it can give people the wrong impression. People will sometimes jump to the conclusion that, oh, you got that for free. We cannot trust your opinion now because you're biased in favor of that company and you don't want to say anything bad about them. But what you may overlook when making such a claim is that if you buy something with your own money, you may be biased too. There is just a different kind of bias. For example, what drives your decision to buy something? I mean, it is a form of bias already, right? You're leaning more towards one manufacturer or the other because of your personal background, because of what you've seen, etc. There is already a certain bias there to begin with. And when you make a purchase decision, you don't normally go, well, so here is a list of pros and cons, and I'm just going to make this well-informed decision. Maybe some people do that. I try to do that, but often people just go, oh, this is cool, I want that now. It's kind of biased, isn't it? And when you've bought it, now it can go it can go a number of ways, but often it goes either the way that you're very happy with your purchase. Now, there is a certain bias in your head, an attempt to justify your purchase. I've spent so and so much money on this, especially if it's a lot of money. This better be good. It has to be good. And you don't want to look like a fool for making a bad decision, which is also why, sometimes people actually seek out reviews of something after they've bought it. And then they're looking for confirmation. They're looking for their decision to be validated. And if it's not, if they see, a negative critique of what they just got, they get angry. That's a pretty common thing. You see it all the time. So that's one form of bias, where they just want it to be good and they will deny any evidence to the contrary. Or they are disappointed by it because something went wrong with it, and then they're so angry because their hard-earned money was wasted that they now have to trash everything that has to do with it, and they're becoming more negative in the way they perceive this thing and its source, be it the manufacturer or the store or whatever. These two are, of course, extreme examples, but those are examples of how just buying something as opposed to getting a free review sample or something, that doesn't mean you're unbiased. There's always a certain form of bias present. But as I said, as long as you acknowledge that, as long as you're transparent, as long as you tell people what your thought process is, and most importantly, be honest. If you're dishonest in a review or critique or opinion or whatever, it's useless. Just don't even bother with it. To give you an example, these are two reproductions of a historical type of sword. And they couldn't be more different in terms of price. This one here, the Albion Knecht, goes for around $1,800. This is $180, the cold steel messer. There's a zero separating these two. It's an extremely high difference in price. Now, some people will look at this, look at the price, look at that and go, this is crap, I don't want that, this is bullshit, way overpriced. And some will look at this and go, cheap junk, do not want, I want quality, you get what you pay for. That kind of thing. So it's a bias either way. The less biased thing to do is, evaluate them based on the price, the value for money. Look at, okay, how is the fit and finish? How do they perform? How do they handle? Etc., etc. And then take that in the context of what they cost. Also, the price of the materials, where they are made. And it's also important to note that a bias does not come out of thin air. I mean, sometimes it is based on insubstantial things like rumors. That can totally happen. But sometimes it's based on personal experience, which is anecdotal evidence, of course, which has to be taken with a sack of salt, basically, because it can be quite inaccurate in many ways. But you can still come to a certain bias based on the experiences you've made. For example, I tend to be biased a little bit against cheaper reproductions of swords in particular, because I haven't had very great experiences with them. I know there are decent ones out there and all of that, but since I can compare them directly to higher end stuff, it's just, to me, it's night and day. The way, for example, these two, the way these handle it's ridiculous. I mean, the difference is astonishing. This feels, well, unfortunately, I cannot show you. I cannot reach this through the screen and give it to you and ask you, what does it feel like? And even if I could, I wouldn't do it, because then it would just kill your internet connection and try to steal it from you, right? So I cannot give you really an idea of what it's like. You may just think, are you crazy? 180 versus 1900. Of course I'm going to go with this. But there is a huge difference. I mean, this feels like a real sword. This feels like, in and of itself, not too bad. But in direct comparison to this feels like just a metal bar. Yeah, it's just, there's no comparison really. The way they're balanced, the way the handle is shaped, and all of that, that's a dramatic difference. But it's still a bias, even though it's based on my hands-on personal experience, which is, of course, subjective. And that's another problem, subjectivity in reviews. You cannot eliminate that. You can only be honest about it and open and transparent and give people an idea of what went on in your head and why. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Just want to talk about this to hopefully give you a somewhat better idea of what it's like from the point of view of a reviewer and what you have to keep in mind when thinking about whether or not a review is trustworthy. So, thanks for watching and have a good one. Generally, opinions expressed. Generally, opinions that are being expressed with. Opinions are being oppressed all the time. It's 2016 after all, where everybody feels oppressed. And not just the SJWs. Everybody. I mean everybody. Opinions that are... Why do I keep saying oppressed? 2016 got to me. What can I say? I don't usually start a statement with a video. No, I usually don't. It tends to be that it's just a statement in of itself, but often in a video.